Um, Welcome. I'm here today with Jaed Coffin, and he is the author of Rough House Friday and A Chant to Soothe Wild Elephants, which actually was my favorite. I loved that. I really did.
Great, thanks.
Um, I can't wait to hear you talk a little bit more about that. And Jed is going to be teaching for us this summer for the first time in the New Hampshire Literacy Institute. So we're just here to pick his brain a little bit. So welcome, Jed.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So if we could just start out and you could maybe talk about your books.
Yeah, sure. Both memoirs, both obviously very personal stories. The first one I wrote when I was probably 27, 28, and really was my first crack at trying to understand the cultural story of my mother's arrival in the United States and how I could stay connected to her history in the village where she comes from and where all of my family still lives in central Thailand. So that was a fun book to write. The material was obviously very accessible for me. It was about the 3 months that I spent living in a Buddhist temple in her village, the same temple where my uncle and grandfather had been monks. Um, but at 27, I didn't really have a full understanding of the complexity of the story I was trying to tell. I think that's one of the things you learn about telling stories in time is that you can start out and you're just peeling back layers. So I think I sort of peeled back the first couple layers. The next book I wrote is called Rough House Friday, also a memoir. Came out about 10 years later. Very dramatic story around how that book came to light, but it's about a very different experience. The years I spent boxing in a bar room in Southeast Alaska, and it's attacking that cultural story from a really different angle, primarily the story of my relationship with my father,
Right.
and how I came to face that story as a young man.
Yeah. And it seems like both of the books you're facing a different parent in a way, right? Like their
Yeah.
history and
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And
And you
also, I
write,
think facing a different time in my life.
yes.
Um, Life got a lot more complicated, as it does in my 30s with a child, and brought up a lot of complex feelings. And that book asked me to be more honest about what I was actually going through than A Chant to Soothe Wild Elephants. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. So what's your favorite part about teaching?
well, I love the experience of watching people who don't think they are writers um, uh, develop what I sometimes call like the salvage yard of their experience. So, and by that I mean, I think when you ask someone to tell a story, they look at you. What's the expression? Like a deer in the headlights, just kind of in shock.
Yeah.
And then, what is so gratifying for me is giving people the space or the permission or whatever word you want to use there to start just taking raw material from their own experience and putting it in front of them. And the phrase salvage yard has always been really important to me, or junkyard, I suppose. I like to work on cars. I like to work on, I do a lot of building and so forth. So I always feel like you need raw material to work with. And so when people just start bringing stuff to me or to themselves and putting it in front of them, and it's that experience of seeing like all this stuff that we can start playing with and moving around and shaping and trying on with other stuff and seeing if they match up and seeing if it goes in the right story or a different story. So it's that really messy kind of reckless period of writing where you're just bringing a bunch of stuff to the table without really knowing what's going to be useful and what's not. And for me, whenever I'm into a project, I'm actually working on my truck outside right now. The most fun part is when you're just ripping things open and trying things out. And then it gets harder and harder, and that's when I usually take on another project. So yeah,
Love that image though, like that we all have like this salvage yard. Like I've
yeah,
never heard it said like that. A lot of the language around that is like, a map of your heart and what, like sort of this more, but this idea of a salvage yard, like this
Yeah.
junk, I love that.
Oh, it's all junk. Yeah, it's all junk. I love going. I mean, I don't know. I go to a lot of salvage yards, and I just love wandering around and picking through things and seeing what is useful and what's not, and what's someone else grabbed it, and that to me is really how I write, is I just start wrestling with all these old rusty parts that need to be cleaned off and repurposed in some ways, and that's how you make stories.
I love it. Thank you. So we're so excited you're going to teach. I know you did a keynote last summer. What are you thinking for this course?
Well, over the last 2 or 3 years, the progress has been slow because of a lot of writing projects. But I've started this storytelling project funded by the Center for Humanities, built around. Well, I initially thought it would be developing a comprehensive creative writing curriculum that New Hampshire residents could access, so that in the event that they weren't able to access creative writing through the normal channels, signing up for a course or whatever, it'd be available to them, and they'd be able to learn all the things that I teach in a college classroom. That, like many projects, was way too broad at the outset, so I've slowly narrowed it down. And one of the things I've realized that has really resonated with people are some of my oral storytelling, live storytelling events, so TED Talks and Moth Radio Hour type performances, and that people really want to know how to do that, and that it's very kind of what's the word, visceral for people to tell stories that way. You're up there, you're in front of people, you're talking to a friend, you have an audience. It's not you in the loneliness of a Word document, but it's you in the, like I said, the kind of visceral, corporeal feeling of being the story living within you. So over the last few years, I've developed a curriculum that is both content based, so it helps emerging storytellers learn how to dredge up those stories, and then also production based, which allows teachers or community members, librarians, etc., use some really basic freeware or free software online to produce those stories into shareable audio formats. So after several years of a lot of failure, I finally found a system, I think, that works really well with my students, where in the course of 5 or 6 classes, we're able to develop the story content and then produce it in a way that makes it accessible to so many people. It's really exciting. So I'm working on launching my own platform in September with New Hampshire Stories, and then I want to give students a preview on what that curriculum will look like. So
That is so exciting. I really want to take that because I love all that, and am a consumer of the Moth and TED Talks and all those good things, but me and technology don't always get along very well.
and I was that way when I started the project. I really kind of eschewed technology. I just wanted to keep it simple. I love the purity of the page, but I've realized that just with a little bit of front end work, you still get that deep intimacy of storytelling with language. You just got to get some of those early skills under your belt, and then it kind of goes. So.
Well, I'm excited for you to join us, as I said, and I appreciate you talking with us today. And we'll hopefully see you on campus this summer.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll see. We'll see. So, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Jed.
Okay.
So, oh, I'm just stopping the recording.
Yeah.
I'm trying to.